Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette, and we're glad that you're with us to stay curious. This is Moon Day. Man on the Moon Day, 54 years ago, July 20th, 1969, at about 5:15 Eastern Daylight Time, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed Lunar Module number 5, made by Grumman Corporation on Long Island, and finessed here at Kennedy Space Center by people like Marty Winkle, who is my co-producer and cameraman for what is our 854th episode. Marty, today should be a national holiday in my opinion, but we're so glad that people like you put America on the moon before Russia, because that was the race. And I welcome you to the show, my friend. Say hello to our Stay Curious watchers.
Hello, Stay Curious watchers, and Mark.
Greetings. You're not much of a sentimental person, knowing you a while, but what do you think about it when you think of this date?
Sometimes it's hard to believe we really did it. I hate to say that people think, well, we didn't really go to the moon, but we did.
But we did. If we didn't, I want Marty to give back all of his pension that he's making right now, and all those other space workers, as well as the fortune that they made. They did. It wasn't such a fortune. They worked hard for it, for their money. But Marty did an excellent presentation for the Brevard Astronomical Society yesterday. We talked about the Grumman lunar module. We're going to feature that today. All right. And his friend Roger Vizioli, who was a designer. Roger was awesome. And Marty, I told him at the end, I was going to ask what you guys' comeback was for people to say we didn't go to the moon. And Roger's comeback was, well, I want 40 years of my life back. I worked like a dog. Okay, I'd have done something else. Of course, a lot of comebacks for that. Why didn't the Russians say we didn't go to the moon? All right, they were in a heated race with us, all right? And if we didn't go to the moon, all these artifacts in our beautiful museum are just replicas and phony and fake. And you can't keep 50,000 people's mouths shut up. It was over 500,000 people that were in on the secret about the moon landing. But sort of it's like the height of insulting these space workers, if you have any doubts. And if you do, God help you. And and the rest of us, let's celebrate today going on the moon. And you can be watching it right now, like I have been on my devices, Apollo 11 real time. This is the website that you can just Google in there. And right now, the astronauts are getting ready to do lunar descent. The 10-minute descent to the moon is going to start about 5 o'clock. So when you're done with Stay Curious, get on to Apollo 11 real time and watch what's going on there, as I was. Quite exciting. Or you can watch it later, and this is a cool website that they have Apollo 13 and 17 on there, that any time you can relive the famous moments. They transpose pictures of that the astronauts took, and even some videos against the actual telemetry and conversations going on with Mission Control and the Apollo 11 astronauts. Of course, these photographs were not processed for 2 or 3 days after they came back and splashed down April or July 24th. So that is the thing that I want to emphasize. When we saw pictures in the newspaper, tomorrow's newspapers had the headlines, man on the moon, July 22nd, 21st would be these newspapers. These photos were taken by a photographer off the television as this dramatic moon landing unfolded live on a very crude television camera. But nonetheless, we saw it live from 11:55 Eastern Daylight Time for about 2 hours. So most of the world was experiencing this on Monday, July 21st. Of course, 135 things had to go right, all right? If any one of these events, 135 of them, one of them went wrong, it could endanger the lives of the astronauts. So this famous lunar landing mission profile you will now see in different ways that are available as home decor. And I love seeing that. We have a lot of NASA things that would look very attractive home decor. I remember a planetarium director friend of mine, Mike Chessman, was thrilled one day to tell me that his wife was going to allow him to put his Apollo frame patches on the living room wall. And I'm going, that is quite an accomplishment, Mike. All right. As we space geeks know, not everybody has the passion we have it and would like to wallpaper the walls with all of our space stuff, in between all of the other Art Deco things that our significant others may enjoy. Here's a little strip of the actually Buzz Aldrin walking around after they planted the flag. The President Nixon talked to them. The program that we did because of President Kennedy's pledge and then his assassination. Ironically, Richard Nixon was the president whose name is on all 6 plaques that are on the moon. And during Apollo 16, they canceled basically 18, 19, and 20 and announced that we were going to do the shuttle, space shuttle. But Grumman is the company out of Bethpage, Long Island, that built airplanes, and lots of them. Just like all the companies that built spaceships, no one had ever done it before. Here's some of the airplanes that Grumman built. I am not a big airplane person, but I have heard of the Grumman Hellcat and other airplanes that, of course, are responsible for winning the World War II and Korean conflicts and things like that. So like all these other companies, Grumman never had built anything that went to space. McDonnell Douglas was an aircraft builder. They built the Mercury and Gemini modules. So the lunar module came to Grumman. North American built the command module. And we're going to have Mr. John Tribe, a hypergalaxy expert, on in a couple weeks and talk about the Grumman lunar module or command module. John Tribe is very familiar to you Apollo geeks out there, as he's has a great story to tell. We've had him on a couple times, but not in our fancy format that we're doing now. The lunar module started out with 5 legs and a round exit. It had more windows on it, as you can see on the left, looking down. And then the genesis of it was streamlined, one for weight. Marty may mention here in a minute how thin the walls were. They actually took acid baths on the metal to literally strip molecules off that would add up to pounds. So on the right is what we ended up with. And there is the 1962 version that we have this model in our museum. Many of you have seen it. It's probably worth $30,000 to $50,000 in kind of a, it's not in poor shape, but it's not in excellent shape. It's about average shape or something like this. A few things are missing. But of course, the 2 spacecraft had to rendezvous and dock in Earth orbit, and then the Saturn third stage launched them to the moon, and then this is the separation while in lunar orbit. But all kinds of artwork depicting this. I'm going to share some of the artwork of Mr. Paul Calley, father of our friend Chris Calley, who hopefully is watching today. Hi to you, Chris. And this is the separation where Mike Collins was left to orbit the moon. Very important job for Mike. And I heard for the first time, Marty, from Nick Thomas, that Mike Collins had the solo instruction book with him. And that meant the instructions of how to get back just with himself if the 2 astronauts had died on the surface of the moon or some point in between. So I knew that there were some preparations for President Nixon to give a speech if they had perished on the moon. Maybe I'll dig that up tomorrow to read it. And the only pictures you're ever going to see of the lunar module in Earth orbit, of course, are Apollo 9, the shakedown of the whole thing in 1969. And that was Apollo 9, Jim McDivitt, Rusty Schweikert, and future moonwalker David Scott were on board that. And you see the ladder up there at the top. Well, below that ladder, all those pads have probes sticking out of them, 5 or 6 feet, Marty. correct me if I'm wrong there. They're somewhere in there. But when that touched the ground, the surface of the moon, a blue light, Grumman colored blue, would come on, and the commander was supposed to shut off the engine and let them drop down that 4 to 6 feet, because shock absorbers were in the legs there. But they never did. They did a gentle landing. Marty, key up that UCAC family microphone and
Yeah, that little blue light said contact.
contact. Yes, said contact.
I think it said lunar contact.
Yeah, lunar contact. And it's a button that you can cherish and have. It is hard to find, actually, worth $100 all day long. Anyway, we're getting on the moon there, and here's the inside of the lunar module. Marty, would you do the honors to talk a little about that to our friends, what you see in there and don't see?
Well, I see a lot, and I don't know if we have enough time to go over everything. There were.
I'm sure Dave Stangy will take the time, or Larry Pushcart there, because we love hearing from you.
But there were 500 switches, 5-pole indications, just indicators, meters, controllers, 500 circuit breakers. Then they were all in this area right here.
Most everything looks duplicated on the commander side on the left and the pilot side on the right. I can see a couple things that aren't on the pilot side, but in the desky in the middle, the computer with the buttons is not in the middle there. But am I right, Marty, that most of the commander side, the pilot has access to the most important controls?
Yeah, and then almost everything was duplicated.
And you see switches on the right here above my head that come into play, I'm sure.
There is one thing missing. I think you mentioned Marquette is missing. That's the computer. But I'll challenge everybody to let me know what else is missing in this picture besides the astronauts.
Yeah. Well, maybe someone will chime in what they see missing. Marty, what are the orange structures in there? Or yellow, pardon me, yellow, and that one orange at the top.
Very technical, Mark. They're handholds.
So just like a subway, you reach up there and could grab that, right? Where there's no seats in there.
On it.
There's no seats in there. The astronauts are standing up.
Yeah.
And why?
The question is, why sit down? You know, they're in zero G most of the time when they're flying it. When they land, they're either going to be on the lunar surface for the most part, or trapping to get ready, or later missions spend the night there.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't need seats.
Well, this is the interior, and as you see the tan parts at the top up there, those were coverings over all the wires and stuff, right, Marty?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Up there at the tan parts,
Yeah.
Was that like a plastic or a cloth?
I believe it was fiberglass, or at least fiberglass type
Yeah.
material. It was non-flammable, so I don't. It looked like fiberglass. I'll put it that way. It felt like it to me. And
You could see the sunshades rolled up over each triangular thing. I need sunshades like that in my car down here. That would be awesome to have fixed sunshades. You just roll up there and affix. A lot of Velcro in there, I'd say, too. Right, Marty?
yeah, and Velcro was a space spin-off. You know, things changed even on back in Mercury days and Gemini days as well as Apollo. And you had a hard time changing the names of let's say the meters or the even switches. So you had Velcro on the panels, and you would put Velcroed nomenclature changes. And especially on a lunar module, because you had 135 different uplinks for different phases for the computer. So things just changed.
Well, where this picture is, right beneath Stay Curious Host, in that area would be a big hump for the descent engine that I liken to the engine in between a Volkswagen bus in there. You're very familiar with that, Marty, right?
Yeah, it wasn't right there. It was further back. You can't realize that the two astronauts are standing up there. So a little further back is where the ascent engine cover was. And that was a seat for the astronauts. It was the only seat.
Well, great. Well, thanks. Any other details there? What is the other missing thing besides the computer in the middle there?
Do you see the arrow? I'm not sure if they see it on their home computers. Anyway, that orange and black thing near the top,
Uh-huh.
right in the middle of that is where the star tracker was.
The star tracker for navigation, huh?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So, not sure where this model is or what it, but it was a cool demonstration picture, one of the clearest I've seen with all the details on there. Well, we're going to look at the skin off of the lunar module. Thank you, Marty, for those comments. This is at, correct me, Marty, is this at Bethpage or KSC?
It's definitely Beth Page.
Okay. And what I find fascinating is when you take off the skin on this thing, oh my gosh, it just looks so tenuous, so complicated. So is that going to work? Which Marty might share a couple stories. One from a couple astronauts looking at it. I know Buzz Aldrin, the first time he saw it, he walked around the thing and said to one, I think it was who was telling that story? Well, it was Bill Waldron was telling that story. Marty, you want to tell their impression that they had?
The one that I know of is Jim McDivitt on Apollo 9. And his first trip to Bethpage where the lunar module was being built, he looked at it. It was probably close to the configuration you see there on the right. And he said, we're going to fly that thing. I mean, it was definitely not aerodynamic. It was very flimsy looking, which it was. And he just had his concerns. But after his Apollo 9 mission flying LEM 3, he said it was a great vehicle.
Bill Waldron, your chief manager on the Lunar Module 5, said that when Buzz Aldrin saw it for the first time, he said, well, you're going to put a cover over it, right? And he said, no, this is it. And Buzz just said, huh, okay. A question, Marty.
Yeah, Bill Whiting is asking, where was the circuit breaker that Buzz had to use his felt tip pen to activate? And he's talking about the when Buzz was suiting up, his I think his backpack hit one of the circuit breakers, and it was one of the I think the engine arming or board circuit breaker. But Bill, that's on the right, over Mark's head, on the right-hand side, out of view. It's in that area, and I think it's on the second row up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. That's a famous incident where the circuit breaker broke, and how did they overcome that, Marty?
Like Bill's indicating, the Buzz took a ballpoint pen and was able to push the breaker back in.
Was there any worry after they looked at that later that they wouldn't have been able to do that? Could they have rigged it somehow?
And what they did in subsequent flights is they installed switch guards over several of the switches that were really critical. And they had it over the circuit breakers also.
There you go.
Yeah.
So switch guards were an upgrade on Apollo 12 then, I'm sure. All right, well, again, with the skin off, wow, you see the, we call them the cheeks, I've heard, have the hypergolic fuel tanks on the ascent engine. The descent part of it, of course, has its own fuel tanks and would carry the scientific instruments and eventually the rover. One of these real small tanks in there, Marty, always amazes me that that's the oxygen tank. It's only about the size of a small beach ball, yet it's compressed oxygen so much that it would allow 3 days in the end on there. Another question.
Yeah, comment, I guess, is from Jonathan Ward. He says, I remember hearing that one of LEM 5's tape meters cracked or shattered during the altitude chamber test at KSC. And that's very possible, Jonathan. I don't recall that, but it doesn't surprise me that could have happened.
Thank you for watching, Jonathan Ward, and I hope you're celebrating man's greatest adventure 54 years ago. Baby boomers like us, it's just this is kind of a hard show to do because you got so much information, so many things you want to talk about, so many things I've heard in the last 5 years from the people who did this. But Jonathan Ward and I were were teenagers and watching this unfold before our eyes as we watched the Gemini program. Every 6 weeks, 2 astronauts were going and testing things to take us to the moon, from rendezvous and docking to the spacesuits to the navigation to staying up there for at least a week. And what were you going to eat? How you going to go to the bathroom? All these things that we take for granted today were so many unknowns. And Jonathan Ward's watching, and space geeks out there like myself. It's just Tommy Usiak. I'm sure he agrees with me. It was just so amazing to be there and watch it unfold, because you go out that night and see the moon in the sky. It was a crescent phase, so it was going to set by about 11, 12 o'clock. But and they did it, and you just really couldn't. And then I meet and become a friend with somebody like Marty that had his fingerprints and gloved hands, of course, all over this machine. And this is his workhouse. What we're looking at right here is where Marty, our co-producer, spent a good deal of his work time looking out those triangular windows. So I get jazzed up about it. Marty, calm me down here. Calm me down.
Mark, you mentioned there were so many things that were unknown. When Kennedy made the announcement that we're going to the moon, we had no idea how to get to the moon. We didn't have communication satellites. We had nothing. Didn't even know the surface of the moon. Can you literally land on the moon, or are you going to sink 10 feet into the lunar surface? There's so many unknowns. And to get it done in 10 years is remarkable.
It is, and that's why NASA, I think, was smart to take it a stage at a time. A lot of people, Apollo 10 was the test dry rehearsal run to go to the moon, and they went within 9 miles of the surface. And some people say, well, why stop at 9 miles? Why go down? Well, they had problems with the radar, up and down radar, canceling each other out, creating a few moments of nervousness and almost a catastrophe when the descent stage separated from the ascent stage. So they, every stage was a cautious journey into the unknown. And I think those spacewalks were some of the hardest things to conquer. Marty?
Yeah, Tom Usiak is asking me, did I work with Tom Kelly at Grumman? And no, I never did. When I worked on a lunar module, I worked either the 7:30 p.m. to 8 a.m. shift, or when we went to 3 shifts, I worked the midnight shift. I was trying to go to school, getting my engineering degree at the time. So people like Tom and a lot of what I call muckety mucks, they weren't on the night shifts. It was very rarely that they were. And I was at the pad just about the whole time. So no, I never did. Never even seen Tom Kelly, to tell you the truth.
And Tom Kelly was the president of Grumman at the time, or the program? Marty?
Sorry?
Tell everyone who Tom Kelly was. He was the president of Grumman, or just...
No, he designed a lunar module. He was what I would call the chief engineer on a lunar module.
Okay. But who we do know is the who was over the Kennedy Space Center Grumman team of 1,400 people.
Yeah, George Curler was our...
George Skurla.
Yeah.
And there's a building at Florida Institute of Technology, the Skurla building, named after him, where Winston Scott, astronaut, spent some time helping shape up that technical college into a wonderful place. So, all right, well, get off my soapbox here just a few minutes, but I kind of got inspired right here in Jonathan Ward and Tom Usiak and other people, because we did live this, and we were young teenagers or in your early 20s, man. This was the Vietnam War was going on that Marty had been to and back. I was in in 1969. I wasn't eligible for the draft, but a few years later I was, and that was an incredible time when you talk about this moonwalk and the Vietnam War going on, and then the racial strife going on for equality that was had its moments of tragedy, with Martin Luther King being assassinated. So just an incredible time. Robert Kennedy got assassinated in 1968 running for president. It was, us young men were wondering, is this how we're going to take care of our leaders? Just kill them? But then 1968, Apollo 8 circled the moon, and saved that year, basically, everybody thinks. And then everyone was thinking about, we're going to go to the moon, and the whole world watched. Now, here at Bethpage, at the Cradle of Aviation, they've sawed a lunar module in half there, and there on the back half, that's the hatch, right, Marty, of the cover for the descent stage. Would that be right? Yes.
I'm not sure what you're looking at, Mark.
I'm pointing there at the gray rectangular box, which got the white thing on top of it. Is that the descent stage cover?
No, yeah, but it was round, so that's what's getting me confused.
Okay.
And there was that little tube type thing on top is not there either. I have no idea what that is.
Right.
But the cover was round. You can see the docking.
Probably one of
above
the
that.
Probably one of the Doson's thermos bottle there with his Campbell's soup in it there that he left there. But I've not been to the Cradle of Aviation. That's on my bucket list. Maybe Marty and I will go there one day. Well, you got to remember that those lunar legs were had to be folded up to fit in the Saturn V rocket and what they called the Saturn launch adapter, the slaw, and that's the angled part below the command service module. And Marty, you would get up in that with the rocket on the pad and have to do work while the rocket was on the pad. And you told some fascinating stories about that last night. Just one of the things that you think about you have to do that wasn't in that job description, was it, Marty?
Yeah, I don't think it's ever written down, but the lunar module is up around the 320-foot level, and the whole Saturn V is sitting on the MLP. That's about probably another 40 foot up, and all that is sitting on top of the launch pad, which is probably, I don't know, 60 to 80 feet up. So you're well over 400 feet at that point. And there was one time in particular, I was in the cabin and running some tests, and there's a storm outside, and it was windy. And I can literally feel that rocket just swing all over the place. And I can just envision the whole rocket falling over on the side. So I was looking to get out of there, but that wasn't to me.
Man.
We finished the test, that's when I finally left.
That wasn't in your job description when you signed up for it, I'm sure. That is just awesome, and just one of the thousands of space workers that have stories like that we love having them on Stay Curious. By the way, I called 3 Apollo people to be on today's show, and they all had either medical appointments or things to do, and so we have a lot of people access, but they've been talked to death. The 50th anniversary. This is 54 years later. I guess at Double Nickel we'll have some more bigger celebrations. But to me, it should really be a national holiday where we celebrate one of the greatest things that America's ever done. Now, one story I heard about those wheels coming out was your wheels, the legs coming out. Yeah. Your friend and boss, Bill Waldron, he's been on our show. We had him on last year, in fact, Bill. He said that when this was at the Kennedy Space Center, in the middle of the night, Jim McDivitt wanted to see, he got up in the middle of the night in his bed coat with his robe on and asked if he could see the legs go out. All right. He was apparently having nervousness about the legs going out on Apollo 9 that tested in Earth. And so pyrotechnics fire that, right, Marty? It's not like an electrical button that sends it out. There's some charges that fire, and the legs swung out, and Bill said they locked in place. Jim McDivitt said, okay, and turned around and went back to bed. True story, right, Marty?
True story. And all the pyros did is just release the legs. It was just basically the weight and gravity. And that's not gravity, just the weight of it, the angle. It was
the momentum.
Now let it, momentum, that's good.
Angular momentum. Okay, great. But you don't think about that. And that was a big moment a couple hours ago on the lunar module when I was watching Apollo 11 in real time when they said, Houston, or Apollo 11, Houston here, have the legs been sprung out? And Armstrong's back. Yes, we did that ahead of schedule. Some things they tried to do as they could do it because they knew they could do it right then out of the playbook. Well, the Russians, of course, wanted to land on the moon, and this is the vehicle, a side view of it, the Lunokhod spacecraft. There was going to be a Soyuz type spacecraft with that took 2 cosmonauts to the moon. One was going to orbit. It's a 2-hour orbit around the moon. Okay, an hour and a half around the Earth because we're bigger and the gravity's pulling you faster. 2 hours around the moon. They were literally going to land maybe Alexei Leonov, their first spacewalker, or Yuri Gagarin, who was training for this too, and he got killed in a jet crash in 1968. But down the right is a big opening of a window that they would look down like the lunar module triangular windows look down so they could see more of the surface. And that cosmonaut was going to land, get out as quick as he could, scoop up some rocks, look around, take a few pictures, get back in, and get ready for the first pass of the Soyuz to come over that they called Zond, Z-O-N-D, and so if not the first pass, the second pass. But they were not going to stay on the moon longer than 4 hours. So it never happened because they didn't have the rocket, the Saturn V rocket like we had. Their rocket called N1 was quite a behemoth, and it failed 4 or 5 times. This is lunar module tail number 9 out of the Grumman stable. This is the real deal when it was at the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex Saturn V building. They took it down out of this is the cafeterias right beneath this, and they put it at the other end of the Saturn V rocket where the Apollo command module is, opposite the engines, of course. And Marty, we've been out there. I have not been out there enough. I need to hop on that bus more and go out there. It is beautiful. It looks so different and big when you see it that close up, right? And if you want to ever go out there, take Marty with you, because I've learned something every time out there looking at the real deal. But something about it being on the ground is different and more intimate than when it was hanging from the ceiling. Do you agree?
Yeah, but like Mark, it's not really on the ground. The landing legs won't support the weight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's being propped up, but
oh, gotcha. Well, that's a good point. Everything was made for 1/6 gravity, even the ladder. So that ladder you see, you couldn't scurry up and down that without breaking it, right, Marty? Because it was made for 1/6 gravity.
Yeah.
You weigh 150 pounds. That's like 30 pounds on the moon. I always forget about that. So how did you stand inside of it and not break the floor?
we had a GSE floor installed.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was propped up. It was supported.
All right, good. One thing that you see black are the flame deflectors that were put on after Apollo 11. That black little slide coming down in there. And what's the orange material called? Tell us the orange, the gold, and the black material, Marty, please.
Well, I just don't want to get into an argument with anybody, but the gold color stuff is Mylar. Although a lot of people online, just people that I know, will call that
Kapton.
Kapton. Kapton is the orange colored material. And the black material is Inconel. And Inconel stands for iron, nickel, and I forget what else it is. But everything out there, everything you see there is very flexible, or very, you can put your hand on it, you can push, leave dents or wrinkles in anything that you see there. It's orange, black, or gray, or gold.
And the outside silver, how thick are those layers on the outside, Marty?
I'm not sure. That's aluminum. I'm not sure about the outside. I know the inside structure. We had weight problems early on the program, and the weight limits kept changing. That's why they reduced the number of windows down to 2 from 4. Went to 4 landing gears instead of 5. But they also milled down the inside structure down to 0.012 mil, which is the thickness of 3 sheets of aluminum foil.
Wow, 3 sheets of aluminum foil. So, with these bulky spacesuits that you're got gloves on and stuff like that, just the training hours had to have paid off for sure. Well, lifting off the moon in this beautiful painting, which kind of inaccurately shows the lunar mountains as sharp and jagged like the Rocky Mountains. No, they're soft and fluffy so to speak, like the Appalachian Mountains. Fluffy because of micrometeorites, millions of years pounding the surface and making it like a dry snow, the lunar regolith. But Marty, I appreciate your comments and want to just indulge you a little bit to what an event it is when you separate from the lander, the descent stage there that had its own engine and its own fuel tanks and electronics. The landing radar was on the bottom of it. Then the ascent stage has its own engine, the simplest engine made, but to separate those, a lot of things had to go right, Marty. Here's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 areas of the lunar module where there were pyrotechnics that had to happen within a fraction of a second. Correct, sir?
Yes, definitely correct.
So all of this is connected. There's bolts in the corners in other areas.
Yeah.
But you've got something called the guillotine here that is the most important, one of the most important things.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely important. That's where all your feed lines are between the ascent and descent stage. And you had to, obviously you had to separate the ascent from descent. So the guillotine had two knives from left to right in that picture, and it would just slice the cables and the piping. And
But with a explosive charge, you see
Yeah.
there, a high explosive charge.
Yeah.
And you actually had two for safety on each side, right? In case the first one didn't do it.
Yep.
What was your share with everybody the nightmare that you say is not just common to you, but pretty interesting nonetheless.
Many people had, we'll say, nightmares or dreams about potential problems with the lunar module. And the one I used to have was the guillotine didn't separate, it didn't work. And at the ascent, the guillotine, the wiring, the piping held the one side, which would be, let's say, the starboard side of the lunar module, to lean over to the side and crash back into the moon.
Wow.
And other people had, similar dreams where the nuts and bolts in the corners did not separate.
Uh-huh.
That's a big concern. I mean, anything you worked on, like on a lunar module in our case, everything was a concern. You're going to have engine problems, you're going to have any kind of problem. Same thing people have with the command service module and the Saturn V itself. Everybody had their own concerns and nightmares.
Absolutely. Kept everybody up. Explain that simplest engine, why you couldn't turn it off if you didn't separate.
It was fuel fed. I mean, it didn't take a spark. It was a hypergolic fuels, and it's just a mixture. Once they meet each other, it ignites. So it was a simple engine. It was you didn't want to have a problem not lifting off the moon. Mark, you got a good story about John Young on lifting off the moon.
Yes, there's these, I forget, tetrahydra something, but these are nasty fuels that an eyedropper full would not only go through your leg, but probably the floor beneath you. We've heard Marty and some of his Grumman people talk about that.
Yeah, but Mark, talk about John Young.
Tell him about John Young?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't. You're talking in that direction. I didn't hear exactly. Yeah, John Young, in a press situation that I was in with him years ago, was asked by one of the reporters, of your 6 launches, which do you remember the most? And he says, well, I'd like to correct you that my 7th launch off of the surface of the moon was the one that concerned me the most. and that was kind of an interesting thing there. John Young, always succinct, answers the questions, and then he's not going to say much more. In the couple times that I was around him in a press situation in Johnson City, Tennessee, of all places. He was a Kiwanis member, and the city manager of Johnson City, Tennessee, knew him pretty well and brought him to these Kiwanis events, or maybe JCs. Maybe it was the JCs, but so. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing all this, Marty. It means so much, everybody out there, because we talk to you every day, but you were part of this. now you could see it for the first time live on in 1971 when Apollo 15 landed on the moon, and then the last two missions of 72, Apollo 16 in April and Apollo 17 in December, we got to watch live as the countdown was the separation. And I remember that was a heartbeat thing for me to watch live. Do you remember watching it live on TV for the first time, Marty?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And you felt good right at this stage.
Yeah, it was interesting because I spent so much time in the cabin, and more so on the landing, when Armstrong and Aldrin were talking about what they see, what they're actually doing. I can relate to everything, so it really made it, in my case, very unique.
Yeah, and several astronauts said it was like riding an elevator, very smooth. Marty, you've met Charlie Duke many times, and I heard him say this that he was surprised at contact at 3, 2, 1, and then hit the button for liftoff, the moon. That when he heard the firing of the pyrotechnics, and that the ascent stage slumped down, just momentarily, just slumped down a couple inches and then roared off. And he said that slump, he's going, oh, and then finally it roared off on there. Did you ever hear that from another astronaut?
No, I haven't heard that, but that's a good question. I'd like to ask somebody, but no.
Yeah.
But my favorite my favorite story is Charlie was Capcom on Apollo 11, and he said he was more stressed, as Apollo 11 was landing on the moon than he was when he was landing on the moon on Apollo
Yes.
15. Because on Apollo 11, if you ever listen to the audio or watch the films, Buzz Aldrin is just black and white, 4 feet left, just firstly, very little commentary. And Charlie was saying when he was landing, he had sight, he had vision, he had feel. He had 1,000 people talking to him, back in Houston. He really had one person, but 1,000 people maybe feeding him information. So he was less stressed landing on the moon himself than as Capcom on Apollo 11.
Yes, and he says, thank you, tranquility. He stutters there in his Charlotte, North Carolina drawl there. Thank you, tranquility. We're about to turn blue in our face.
Yeah,
and that's because they missed the landing site by over 4 miles because of these gravity mass concentrations that Apollo 10 hadn't picked up. And it was quite a feat for Neil Armstrong to land in an area that he never trained in, 4 miles down the projected landing area. They had looked at some of those spots, but not training the hours like they did in this simulator that was like a big TV game that in the late 60s there. Well, there's the blast off of Apollo 11, the gold shrapnel coming off. Not shrapnel, but it's like shrapnel, the gold foil coming off there. The American flag may have fell over. There's some pictures of it that may not have. When we went back to the moon with the rover, Apollo 15 was at quite a incline, as you see there, with Hadley Mountain in the background, but that didn't matter. It was just fine. Two of the landings, one of the pads was lucky. They were about 3 feet away from craters. And sometimes the rolling slopes of the moon hid the lunar module. Of course, they got up to 7 miles away from it. It was the furthest that they drove the lunar rovers. And that would be, to lose sight of that thing, I'm not sure I would want to, Marty. Just be psychologically to keep it in your eye all the time. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, on Apollo, on all the other missions prior to 15, the astronauts were not allowed to walk further away from the lunar module than they could see it.
Yeah, that's right. And then when they got further away where they couldn't see it, they had to had their life systems had to be able to get them back.
Well, they followed their tire tracks.
Yeah, they followed their tire tracks. Yeah, of course. Yeah, they followed tire tracks, but they wouldn't go. They had to make sure they had enough oxygen to get back there. But yeah, and 21 miles is what several of the missions did. There's the Grumman employees. Not sure if you're in there or not, Marty. We tried to look for you a couple times, and the lunar module behind there. It takes a lot of people behind these people even to make the doggone thing work. And many of you were rewarded with a little lunar module. This happens to be the late Scott McLeod's that sold at an auction for over $1,000. I've seen yours, Marty, that you were presented with by the Grumman Brass, muckety mucks as you call them. Nice little memento to have. Yes.
But one correction, Mark. I wouldn't say many people got that.
Oh, okay.
Very few people got that model. You don't see many around.
Well, I'm glad you did then. After all, you were the lead electrical engineer on those missions there, worked all the missions. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, not everybody got that. Very few, huh? Cool. That's why they're worth a lot. And if you could find one at an American Space Museum auction, it's worth the money because it's a beautiful piece of detailed modeling with the Grumman logo on one side, NASA on the other. And the big panorama with Neil's shadow there. Buzz is at the Eagle doing his lunar mission there. So you look at this whole area here. In fact, Neil is about the furthest way that he walked away from the lunar module. How far was that? This drama unfolding for 2 hours before our eyes, okay? And it's just mesmerizing. And they're on another planet, basically, in a celestial world 250,000 miles away. Well, just how do you relate to that, to where they were walking and how far away were they going? All right. Well, I'll tell you that here in just a minute. Marty, did you have anything to say else to add there as we're getting away from your lunar module? The moon's going to be full in just a week from this weekend, in fact, at the 14-day mark. It's about 4 days old today. It's going to be a nice crescent. And I want to emphasize, when you look at the full moon, on the right-hand side is that oval, all right? And that oval is Mare Crisium, the Sea of Crisis. And here are the 6 lunar landing sites. 11, 12, and 14 are right near the equator, because that was an easy, less fuel and so forth. But 15 was way up in the Apennine Mountains, we call them, and near Hadley Rill, a lava flow that collapsed, and that was a gorgeous sight and landing there with David Scott and Jim Irwin, and orbiting, of course, was Al Worden. Then 16 landed in the mountain area there that you see, very, very easy to see towards the middle of the moon. And then 17, the last one, is over by that oval, all right? So you can see 4 of the sites during first quarter moon. All right, and they're fun to see through a telescope. You can get maps, and if you have a telescope, and figure out exactly where there are. Apollo 11 again on the shore of the Sea of Tranquility. Now this is what the moon looked like when they were launched on July 16th, 1969. The landing site wasn't visible yet. All right, in fact, the picture's upside down. South is at the top, north is at the bottom. It's just how astronomers do it. And you see the oval at the bottom is Mare Crisium. And here again, Mare Crisium is, we've inverted this one to confuse you more. Mare Crisium's at the top, right-hand corner, 2 o'clock on this. And still, the lunar landing site is not visible yet until they got into lunar orbit. And now we're showing you some close-ups of the Mare Serenity, Sea of Tranquility. Mare Serenity, Sea of Serenity is to the left. Tranquility is in the mirror. The Sea of Fertility is to the upper right. And so there you see the yellow marks the spot, and X marks the spot there. You can see that crater Moltke through a telescope, as well as Ritter and Sabine. You will not see the craters named after Aldrin, Collins, and Armstrong. Those were named after this mission. But you can definitely find Moltke with a 6-inch reflecting telescope or a 3-inch refractor. Now, the lunar orbiter, reconnaissance orbiter, is still in action. Excuse me. Let me refresh myself here. with some moon water that you can buy locally around here. Um, the lunar module is shown there, the bright area with the arrow. We can see it in its shadow underneath there. You can see the tracks where the astronauts walked around that area. The LRR and PSP are the lunar science experiments that Buzz Aldrin was doing while Neil was walking around gathering samples, taking a few there, and he walked over that crater. All right, and that crater's called Little West Crater. There again, you see the astronaut trail, the seismometers left there, the retro reflector. That's just a bunch of mirrors that you can bounce a laser off of and calculate to the inch how far away the moon is. And there's a descent stage. All right. All of this drama happening, how big of an area was all this covering? All right, there you got the lunar module on the left, the toss zone they call it. That's where they threw away their garbage and stuff. The area of intense human activities all on the left. And then this little west crater, Neil walked over there and he threw something of his family's significance in that crater. And I'm not going to be the spoiler there, but watch the movie First Man, where popular actor Ryan Gosling is Neil Armstrong in it. I like it. It's not very scientific, yet it sticks to scientific of the mission. It's about the families, the wives, the kids, how they were ignored, basically, not mistreated because of the demands on their husbands. And it's very well depicted, the moon landing, and something that Neil did to honor someone in his family. But this whole area passing in front of you would happen on a basketball court. Everyone's been in a high school basketball court, if not a college and pro basketball court. If the lunar module was parked underneath the basket on the left, okay, you're watching this from a stadium. Imagine Neil coming down. Oh, where did I put that in there? Oh, did that not go, Marty? Oh, that didn't show up. Okay. Sorry about that. What I was showing next was, it was supposed to be next was a big arena, picture of a arena out there to show you that if you're looking down on a basketball court watching a game, the whole lunar landing drama is unfolding you right on that basketball court, okay? And Neil, when he went over to that crater, he went over to the opposite basket up in the stands just a little bit, and then went back over to the basket underneath there. So don't know why it wasn't showing that, but as we look at the moon landing, thank you, Neil's going down the ladder. These images have been enhanced big time. We've got EGG, Amos Gritish there, worked for EEG apparently. Thank you, Amy. Gary Cooper's watching. Roz Mager's watching. Bill, thank you, Bill Whiting. Emily Carney, she's Space Hipster #1. Thank you for staying curious with us today, Emily, and thank you for liking our Dog Days of Summer show that I did yesterday. Doug Force is watching in L.A. Tommy Usiak, he remembers his heart beating as we were watching this. Carlton Bailey was watching it. Bill Whiting, big shout out to you. Jonathan Ward, thank you, sir, for watching today. The enhancement of these pictures was just incredible. They went from there to there, all right, off the television screen. And tomorrow I'm going to show you some more pictures that were enhanced. One will forever change how you look at this historic picture. And it's not the visor shot that we call it, with a Buzz standing there, that the stamp and everything is made of, with Neil and the lem in his visor. Jamie Orange, thank you for watching. When I was watching the moonwalk 54 years ago, I made this sketch. Not to brag about being an artist, because I don't consider myself one, but I've always liked sketching things in the spur of the moment, and I was mesmerized by them walking on the moon, and made this sketch on probably around about 1 o'clock in the morning, July 21st, 1969, living in Findlay, Ohio, and I was just about 80 miles north of where Neil Armstrong grew up on Interstate 75, connected us there. Well, hope that you've enjoyed this, Jamie Orange and Neil 030's watching. Maurice Krasowski, I'll pronounce that good one day. Michael Rose is watching. Thank you for watching. Tom Celentano, Chris Range, Ben of Scarborough. Good to see you back watching us again. And Christopher Mick, I'm sure he is celebrating Moon Day today as a solar system ambassador. And Connie Hazel McDaniels staying curious with us today, Marty. Well, there's a little sketch that I made, and to let y'all know that we never will forget the fabulous events of man's greatest adventure. Out here at Spaceview Park, just 3 blocks from where Marty and I are the hands of Neil Armstrong and 30 other astronauts in the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo program. And across from Neil is President John F. Kennedy and his great speech. You see the names on that pylon, we call it. Those are space workers. Hundreds of them are on 16 pylons out there celebrating Apollo and the shuttle era. And we have some room for the Apollo era. We don't have any more pylons left for the shuttle era. But what an homage, one of a kind place in the world. I call it like the Taj Mahal, the Roman Colosseum. The only place you can go out and put your hands on Neil, Buzz, Mike Collins, Gene Cernan, Jack Lousma, and Harrison Schmidt, just on and on and on. And it's sort of a happy place to go and clear your thoughts out there. And we thank our public service of officers for keeping the transients at bay. We understand, a lot of people are homeless under the circumstances beyond their control. And we've had to tell some of them that we don't want you sleeping and living there. But it's a beautiful place, and we hope that you can come and see it soon. So, Marty, I can't thank you enough for enhancing today's show with your comments. Do you have any final thoughts as we say goodbye to our Stay Curious friends after spending an hour celebrating what everybody should? Get on the channel right now. Apollo, there we are, Apollo 11 real time. They're about to land on the moon, folks. They're about to start the 10-minute descent a few minutes after 5. So, Marty, thanks again for a tremendous job and all of your wonderful comments as a real worker that put America on the moon. Tomorrow we're going to look at some of the stories that were in the paper, just a mishmash of Apollo 11 again, but I'm going to show you a couple photos that have been enhanced of the moonwalk that will really probably blow your mind of what's was revealed. So until then, I thank everybody. Let's go watch them. Get the boys on the moon again. Get Mike Collins up there, happy to be photographing Apollo 12's landing site. And until then, I'm Marquette saying I can't wait to see you with more Apollo 11 tomorrow to bridge the space between us.